Hold on a second before you go anywhere near that skip button. In this video, we're covering 3 things that are making MotoGP 2026 genuinely fascinating right now. First, why Marc Marquez, the reigning world champion, finished 5th at Austin, a circuit that used to be practically his back garden. Second, why he had the audacity to stand in front of the cameras and say the bike is absolutely fine. It's him that's the problem. And third, there's a new name tearing up the leaderboard this season and giving Ducati a proper headache. Whether you're a diehard MotoGP fan or you've just stumbled into this world, stick around to the end, because we'll be asking for your take before we're done. Right then, let's get into it. Here's the thing about Austin, the Circuit of the Americas. COTA. If you want to sound like you know what you're on about it, it's not just any old track for Marc Marquez. During his Honda years, he was virtually untouchable there. 7 wins at the same venue. 7. That's not luck, that's ownership. The man had his name written all over that tarmac. But the 2026 US Grand Prix felt like a completely different story. Marquez arrived as the defending MotoGP World Champion, and yet the entire weekend had this uncomfortable feeling of a bloke not quite at home in his own house. The Ducati was still a brilliant machine, but something was off. And Marquez himself was the one who said it. Before the main race even got underway, the trouble had already started. In Saturday's sprint, Marquez got tangled up with Fabio Di Giannantonio from the VR46 squad. The stewards handed him a long lap penalty for the clash, meaning come Sunday's race he'd be forced to loop through a designated section of the circuit that bleeds away precious seconds. In modern MotoGP, where a single second can cost you 3 or 4 positions, that's a punishment that stings. Sunday itself wasn't much smoother. In the early laps, Marquez found himself caught in a proper dogfight with Di Giannantonio and Honda's Joan Mir, the 3 of them scrapping away around 4th, 5th, and 6th. After going through the penalty loop, he dropped out of the top 10 altogether, then had to claw his way back up through the field. He crossed the line in 5th. For most riders on the grid, that's a decent result. For Marquez at Austin, it felt like a defeat. When asked whether a win might have been on without the penalty, he was refreshingly honest. A podium, possibly. A victory? No. He said the team had given everything, but Saturday's mistake was always going to come back and bite him. Now this is where it gets genuinely interesting. When a rider has a weekend to forget, the playbook is pretty well established. The setup wasn't quite right. The conditions didn't suit us. We need to understand the data. All perfectly reasonable, all perfectly safe. Marquez, though, went somewhere else entirely. In his own words, he made it crystal clear. The bike is not what's missing. He is. He explained that in those opening laps, when the tires are still fresh and the machine is at its most aggressive and demanding, he simply cannot ride it the way he needs to. He said he feels like he's adapted to a position on the bike rather than finding a natural one. And as a result, he's going through the motions rather than actually making a difference. Still fast, yes, but not the kind of fast that separates the very best from the rest. For a 7-time world champion to stand up and say that in front of the press takes a particular kind of courage. There was no deflection, no spin, no carefully worded non-answer. He pointed at himself, straight up. This part matters quite a lot, and it deserves a proper mention. Marquez won his championship in 2025, but that season ended earlier than planned because of a shoulder injury serious enough to rule him out of the final stretch of the campaign. He came into 2026 still working his way back to full fitness. Not quite there yet. Not the finished article. Think about what that actually means in practice. You're an elite athlete. You've been injured. The muscles haven't fully rebuilt. The instincts aren't as sharp as they were. And, perhaps most importantly, the willingness to throw yourself into the kind of risk-taking that defines MotoGP at the very top level hasn't completely returned. That psychological edge, once chipped away, takes time to come back. Marquez knows this better than anyone. That's precisely why he said the next 3 weeks before the next round at Jerez in Spain are going to be spent working on those opening laps, not on the bike's setup, on himself. But let's zoom out for a moment because there's a much larger picture forming here. Ducati, the Italian manufacturer that has essentially ruled MotoGP for the better part of the last 5 years, is beginning to look vulnerable. At the USGP, they couldn't put a single rider on the podium, not one. And who's been doing the damage? Aprilia. Specifically, Marco Bezzecchi, who didn't just win in Austin, but has now won all three of the opening Grand Prix of the 2026 season. Back to back to back. Bezzecchi, who in previous seasons was spoken about as a promising talent, is now riding like an absolute force of nature. Ducati's response has been telling. They debuted a brand new aerodynamic wing at Austin that by all accounts was clearly inspired by what Aprilia have been doing with their package. When a team as dominant as Ducati starts borrowing ideas from the competition, you know the competitive landscape has shifted. One statistic puts it all in perspective. From the 2021 British Grand Prix onwards, Ducati had been on the podium at every single race. A streak stretching nearly 5 years. In 2026, they've already missed out twice in 3 rounds. That's not a blip. That's a trend. The good news is that the calendar has offered everyone a bit of breathing room. The Qatar Grand Prix, which would have been next on the schedule, has been postponed. That creates a gap of roughly 3 weeks before the Spanish Grand Prix at Jerez at the end of April. On top of that, there's an official in-season test scheduled shortly after Jerez, giving every team and rider meaningful time to develop both their machinery and their riding. For Marquez, this is a genuine opportunity. He said Jerez is a very different type of circuit to Austin, but then added something quite telling. If you're truly fast, you're fast everywhere. He's not looking for a more forgiving track to hide behind. He wants to fix the problem at its root, improve those early laps, and come back a better version of himself, rather than rely on the Ducati to paper over the cracks. That, right there, is the mindset of a champion. The results might not be showing it yet, but the thinking absolutely is. Right, before we wrap this up, we want to hear from you. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you think Marc Marquez can pull this around and genuinely challenge for the 2026 title, or has too much ground already been lost in these opening rounds? And if you enjoyed this video and found it worth your time, please do give it a like and hit subscribe. We cover MotoGP in a way that's informative without taking itself too seriously, and there's plenty more to come this season. Share it with a mate who follows the racing too. The more the merrier. So there you have it. Marc Marquez, former King of Austin, leaves Texas with 5th place and a statement of uncommon self-awareness. In a sport where egos tend to be as finely tuned as the machinery, he chose honesty over excuses. Whether that honesty is the first step towards a proper comeback, or whether it signals something more difficult to resolve. Well, that's the question, isn't it? What's clear is that MotoGP 2026 is shaping up to be anything but predictable. Bezzecchi is on fire. Ducati are under genuine pressure for the first time in years, and Marquez is on a very personal journey to rediscover himself. The season has barely started, and it's already brilliant. See you in the next one. Stay with it, and never leave before the checkered flag.